Emma Hartwell's hands trembled as she held the rusted key to Beacon Point Lighthouse. 3 months after her grandmother's funeral, she was finally ready to face the inheritance that had haunted her family for generations. The October wind whipped her dark hair across her face as she approached the towering structure perched on Maine's most isolated cliff. She'd driven 4 hours from Boston, leaving behind her corporate job and cheating ex-boyfriend, desperate for a fresh start. The lighthouse had been abandoned for 15 years, ever since her grandmother Rose stopped maintaining it. Emma remembered childhood visits here, but those memories felt dreamlike now, filtered through decades and tragedy. Her grandmother had been found at the bottom of these very cliffs, though the police ruled it an accident. Emma had always suspected there was more to the story. The heavy wooden door groaned as she pushed it open, releasing the scent of salt air and decay. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, streaming through salt-stained windows. The circular room felt smaller than she remembered, dominated by the spiral staircase that wound up to the lamp room far above. Emma set down her suitcase and pulled out her phone to call her sister.
"I made it,"
she said when Sarah answered.
"It's exactly like I remembered, just sadder somehow."
Are you sure about this, Em? That place has been empty for so long. You could sell it and buy something normal, maybe a nice condo back in civilization.
Emma walked to the window facing the ocean. Waves crashed against the rocks below with hypnotic violence.
"I need this, Sarah. After everything with David, after losing my job, I need somewhere that's just mine."
After hanging up, Emma began exploring the lighthouse systematically. The main floor held the old keeper's quarters, a kitchen, sitting area, and bedroom that her grandmother had lived in during her final years. Everything was covered in dust, but the furniture remained exactly as Emma remembered. She found her grandmother's reading glasses still on the nightstand, a half-finished crossword puzzle beside them. The second floor had been used for storage, filled with maritime equipment and boxes of her grandmother's belongings. Emma planned to go through them eventually, but first she wanted to make the main floor habitable. As evening approached, she managed to get the electricity working and discovered that the plumbing still functioned, though the water ran brown for several minutes before clearing. She was heating soup on the old gas stove when she heard it, a sound like footsteps on the floor above. Emma froze, listening intently. The lighthouse creaked constantly in the wind, she told herself. Old buildings made noise, but the sound came again. Definitely rhythmic, definitely footsteps. If you heard unexplained footsteps on your first night alone in an isolated lighthouse, what would you do? Investigate immediately, wait until morning, or call for help? Let me know in the comments, because what Emma decided next would determine whether she'd survive the night. Emma grabbed a flashlight and climbed the spiral stairs. The second floor appeared undisturbed, boxes and equipment exactly as she'd left them. But as she swept her flashlight across the room, something caught her eye. Fresh footprints in the dust. Large boot prints that definitely weren't hers. Her heart hammering, she followed the prints to the far corner where they simply stopped. Emma examined the wall carefully, running her hands along the aged wood paneling. Her fingers found what her eyes had missed, a seam in the wood, barely visible. When she pressed against it, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The secret passage was not in any of her grandmother's stories or the lighthouse's official history. Emma stood at the threshold, her flashlight beam disappearing into the black depths below. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to drive back to Boston and pretend she'd never found this place. But she thought of her grandmother's mysterious death, of the questions that had haunted her family for years. She descended. The stairs were wooden and old, but surprisingly solid. The air grew colder with each step, carrying scents of earth and something else, something lived in. At the bottom, Emma found herself in a circular chamber carved directly into the cliff rock. The space was larger than she'd expected, with stone walls that wept moisture and a ceiling that disappeared into shadow above. But what stopped her breath wasn't the architecture. It was the evidence that someone had been living here. A camp bed sat against one wall, neatly made with military precision. Shelves lined another wall, filled with canned goods, bottles of water, and books. A small camping stove occupied a makeshift kitchen area, and Emma could see that it had been used recently. Candles provided the only light, dozens of them placed around the room, their wax pooled on every available surface. On a rough wooden table in the center of the room, Emma's flashlight illuminated something that made her stomach lurch. Photographs. Dozens of them. All of her grandmother. Rose working in her garden, Rose reading on the lighthouse deck, Rose sleeping in her bed. The photos spanned years, maybe decades, taken with a telephoto lens from hidden vantage points. You shouldn't be here. Emma spun around, a flashlight beam catching a man emerging from the deeper shadows of the chamber. He was tall and lean, maybe 40 years old, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of beard. His clothes were worn but clean, and his pale blue eyes held a combination of wariness and something else she couldn't identify.
Who are you? What are you doing in my grandmother's lighthouse?
Emma demanded, backing towards the stairs. The man raised his hands slowly, showing he wasn't armed. My name is Daniel Crown, and I've been taking care of this place for 15 years.
Taking care of it? By living like some kind of hermit in a secret basement?
Rose knew I was here. She let me stay. We had an arrangement. Emma's mind reeled.
That's impossible. My grandmother would have told someone. She would have told me.
Daniel moved slowly to the table and picked up one of the photographs. Rose sitting in the lighthouse's lamp room, looking directly at the camera with a slight smile. She knew about the photos too. I asked her permission for everyone.
You're lying.
But even as Emma said it, something in Daniel's manner made her doubt her own words. There was a gentleness in how he handled the photograph, a reverence that spoke of genuine affection rather than obsession. Why don't you sit down? Let me tell you the real story of your grandmother and this lighthouse. Emma is alone in a secret basement with a stranger who's been photographing her grandmother for years. Should she listen to his story or run for help? What would you do in her situation? The choice she makes next will change everything. Against every rational thought in her head, Emma sat down. Maybe it was exhaustion from the long drive and emotional day, or maybe it was the strange calm that Daniel projected, but she found herself wanting to hear what he had to say. 15 years ago, I was a different person. I was a war photographer, recently back from Afghanistan. I'd seen things that... He paused, his hands clenching and unclenching. I wasn't handling civilian life well. I was drinking too much, sleeping too little, jumping at every loud noise. Emma studied his face in the candlelight. There was pain there, old and deep. I came here planning to kill myself. This cliff seemed like a good place to end it. But when I got here, your grandmother was tending the lighthouse garden. She took one look at me and invited me in for tea.
Grandmother Rose was always kind to strangers.
She was more than kind. She saved my life. She let me tell her things I'd never told anyone, about the war, about the friends I'd lost, about the guilt that was eating me alive. And when I broke down completely, she didn't call the police or a psychiatrist. She showed me this place. Daniel gestured around the stone chamber. This was built during Prohibition as a smuggler's cave. Your grandmother's own grandfather used it to hide rum runners from the Coast Guard. Rose said every old building needed its secrets, and this could be mine until I was ready to rejoin the world.
So you've been living down here for 15 years?
Not just living, helping. Daniel stood and moved to another corner of the room, where Emma now noticed a sophisticated radio setup and what looked like weather monitoring equipment. "I've been maintaining the lighthouse beacon illegally, guiding ships away from the rocks during storms. Your grandmother couldn't officially run the lighthouse after the Coast Guard decommissioned it, but people still died on these rocks when the weather turned bad." Emma felt her worldview shifting.
The Coast Guard never knew?
Rose reported ship sightings and weather conditions, but they thought she was just a vigilant old woman with binoculars. They never suspected someone was actually operating the beacon. "We saved 17 ships over the years, hundreds of lives." The revelation hit Emma like a physical force. Her grandmother hadn't been a lonely old woman slowly going senile in an abandoned lighthouse. She'd been part of a secret mission, working with this mysterious man to continue the lighthouse's true purpose.
The photographs.
Her voice was barely a whisper. "Rose asked me to document our work. She said someday someone would need to know the truth about what happened here." Daniel picked up another photo, this one showing Rose and an unfamiliar man working on lighthouse equipment. "But I also photographed her because she became the most important person in my world. She was like a mother to me, or maybe a guardian angel." Emma felt tears building in her eyes.
How did she die, Daniel? Really?
Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he struggled with emotion. She'd been sick for months, but she hid it from everyone, even me. Cancer. By the time I realized how bad it was, she was dying. The night she fell from the cliff, she'd climbed up to the lamp room one last time to run the beacon during a storm. There was a freighter out there, the Margaret Rose, struggling in heavy seas.
She fell while operating the lighthouse.
She collapsed. Heart failure, the doctor said later. But Emma, she saved that ship. The Margaret Rose made it safely to Portland because your grandmother gave everything she had to keep that light burning. Emma sat in stunned silence, processing this new understanding of her grandmother's final moments. Not a tragic accident, but a heroic sacrifice.
Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you come to the funeral?
Daniel's expression grew pained. How could I? A strange man living in secret beneath her house, photographing her for years. Who would have believed I wasn't responsible for her death? I couldn't risk dishonoring her memory. The logic was sound, but Emma sensed there was more to his isolation than just protecting her grandmother's reputation.
Daniel, what aren't you telling me?
He stood abruptly and walked to the radio equipment. You should go back upstairs, Emma. Get some sleep. In the morning you can decide what you want to do about me.
What I want to do about you?
Whether you'll call the police, sell the lighthouse, kick me out. I'll understand whatever you choose. I've been living on borrowed time for 15 years. Maybe it's time I faced the real world again. Emma stood as well, but instead of heading for the stairs, she moved closer to Daniel.
What if I don't want you to leave?
The question surprised them both. Daniel turned to face her, and in the flickering candlelight, Emma saw something that made her heart race. Not just gratitude or relief, but a spark of the same attraction she was trying to deny in herself. Emma, you don't know what you're saying. You don't know me.
I know you spent 15 years helping my grandmother save lives. I know you loved her enough to document every moment you shared. I know you're probably the reason she was happy in her final years instead of lonely. Maybe I don't know your whole story yet, but I know you're not the dangerous man I thought you were when I first found you down here.
Daniel's control seemed to crack slightly. Emma, I haven't been around people in 15 years. I don't know how to do this anymore.
Do what?
Care about someone new, risk having them leave. The vulnerability in his voice broke something open in Emma's chest. Here was a man who'd been hidden away from the world for so long that he'd forgotten how to hope for connection. And here she was, running from her own life, equally afraid of being hurt again.
I'm not going anywhere. At least, not right away. I came here to start over, to figure out who I am without all the noise of my old life. Maybe we can figure it out together.
Daniel stared at her for a long moment, then slowly reached out to touch her face. His fingers were rough from years of manual work, but his touch was gentle. Emma, you're taking a big risk trusting me.
You're taking a big risk trusting me, too.
And then, somehow, they were kissing. It was soft at first, tentative, as if both of them were afraid the other might disappear. But as Emma melted into Daniel's arms, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. When they finally broke apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. This is crazy.
Good. I'm tired of sensible.
They spent the rest of the evening talking, Daniel showing Emma the equipment he used to monitor ship traffic and weather patterns. He'd created an intricate system over the years, coordinating with other lighthouse enthusiasts along the coast to maintain an unofficial network of warning lights for ships that relied on visual navigation during electronic failures.
It's incredible. You and Rose created your own Coast Guard station.
She was the real hero. I just provided the technical support. Look at this. She tracked every ship that passed, noted weather patterns, even recorded wildlife migrations. Your grandmother was a scientist, Emma. She just never had the formal training to prove it. As the night grew late, Emma realized she was faced with a decision. She could return to the main lighthouse and try to process everything she'd learned, or
I could stay down here tonight. I mean, if you have extra blankets or something.
Daniel looked uncertain. Emma, I don't want you to feel pressured.
I don't. I feel safe.
And she realized it was true. Despite the strangeness of the situation, despite meeting Daniel only hours ago, she felt safer in this hidden stone chamber than she had in months in her Boston apartment. Daniel set up a second bed using spare camping gear, and they settled into what was probably the most unusual first date in history. As Emma drifted off to sleep, listening to the distant sound of waves against the cliff and Daniel's steady breathing nearby, she felt a peace she hadn't known she was missing. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Daniel was cooking breakfast on his camp stove, already dressed and alert. Morning light filtered down from somewhere above, and Emma realized there must be hidden vents that brought in fresh air and natural light. Good morning. Sleep okay?
Better than I have in months. Daniel, can I ask you something?
Anything?
Yesterday you said you were a war photographer. Do you still take pictures?
Daniel's expression grew cautious. Sometimes. Why?
Because I saw your equipment last night and those photos of my grandmother. They're beautiful. You have a real gift.
Emma, those photos were taken without most people's knowledge. I'm basically a stalker with artistic pretensions.
No, you're not.
Emma stood and moved to the table where the photographs were spread. In daylight, she could see them more clearly, and what she saw took her breath away.
These aren't stalker photos, Daniel. These are love letters.
The images captured her grandmother in moments of joy, concentration, quiet contemplation. Rose feeding seagulls, Rose reading by lamplight, Rose laughing at something off camera. They were intimate, but not invasive. Artistic, but not exploitative.
She really knew you were taking them?
Every single one. Sometimes she'd pose, sometimes she'd tell me to put the camera away because she was having a bad hair day. She said I was documenting a life well lived. Emma picked up a photo of Rose standing in the lighthouse's lamp room, her face illuminated by the massive beacon.
This should be in a museum.
Emma, I can't show these to people. What if someone recognizes the location? What if they figure out what we were doing here? It was then that Emma realized Daniel's isolation wasn't just about grief or trauma. He was genuinely afraid of exposure, of having his sanctuary discovered.
Daniel, what exactly are you hiding from?
The question hung in the air like smoke. Daniel set down his coffee cup and walked to the radio equipment, his shoulders tense. I told you I was a war photographer. What I didn't tell you was that I took some pictures I shouldn't have. Pictures that could have gotten important people in serious trouble. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underground chamber's temperature.
What kind of pictures?
The kind that end careers and start congressional investigations. I documented some activities in Afghanistan that certain people would prefer remained classified forever.
Activities like what?
Daniel was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. Arms dealing, to groups we were supposed to be fighting against. I have photographs of American officials exchanging weapons for information, and those officials now hold very high positions in government. The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. Daniel wasn't just a hermit hiding from social anxiety. He was a whistleblower hiding from people who could make him disappear.
That's why you can't surface. That's why you've been down here for 15 years.
I tried to go through proper channels when I first got back. I submitted the photos to my editor, to military investigators, to 3 different congressional offices. Suddenly, my editor decided the photos were inconclusive. The military claimed they were fabricated. And one night, someone broke into my apartment and stole every piece of equipment I owned, along with all my backup files.
But you still have the originals?
Daniel nodded toward a small safe in the corner of the room. Voice 3. Daniel. Hidden where no one will ever find them. Rose was the only person who knew they existed. Emma sank into her chair, overwhelmed. She'd thought she was dealing with a traumatized veteran who'd found peace in isolation. Instead, she'd stumbled into a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government.
Daniel, 15 years is a long time. Those officials might be retired now or dead. Maybe it's safe for you to come forward.
Maybe. Or maybe they've spent 15 years making sure that anyone with evidence against them will never be able to use it. Emma, I need you to understand something. If you stay here, if you get involved with me, you'll be putting yourself at risk too. Emma has discovered that Daniel isn't just a hermit. He's hiding explosive evidence of government corruption. Should she run to protect herself, or stay and help him find justice? What would you do if you uncovered a conspiracy that powerful people killed to protect? Your choice could change everything. Emma stared at Daniel, her mind racing. Everything made sense now. His paranoia, his isolation, his reluctance to trust. He'd been protecting not just himself, but anyone who might get close to him.
Have there been others? Other people who found out about you?
A few over the years. Hikers mostly, who discovered the entrance to this place. Your grandmother always handled it, told them it was just an old storage area for Lighthouse equipment. But there was one person who didn't believe her story.
Who?
A private investigator, about 3 years ago. He was asking questions in town about Rose, about whether she might be hiding anything valuable in the Lighthouse. He found this place while Rose was in town buying supplies. Emma felt her blood turn cold.
What happened to him?
He tried to blackmail me. Said he'd expose my location unless I paid him $50,000. I didn't have that kind of money, obviously. But more importantly, I realized that if a small-time PI could find me, then the people I was really hiding from probably could too.
So what did you do?
Daniel stopped pacing and looked directly at Emma. I scared him off, let him think I was more dangerous than I actually am, convinced him that exposing me would bring down heat on him that he didn't want to handle. Something in Daniel's tone made Emma uneasy.
How exactly did you scare him off?
Emma, you don't want to know the details.
Yes, I do. If I'm going to stay here, if I'm going to trust you, I need to know what you're capable of.
Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his internal struggle visible on his face. Finally, he walked to a trunk in the corner and pulled out what looked like a military-issued knife. I held this to his throat and told him that I'd killed before and wouldn't hesitate to do it again if he threatened Rose or our work here. I let him think I was a dangerous veteran who'd gone completely off the grid, maybe even that I was responsible for Rose's death. Emma stared at the knife, then at Daniel.
Were you lying? About having killed before?
No. The single word hung in the air like a death sentence. I was a combat photographer, Emma. Sometimes the camera wasn't enough protection. The revelation shifted something fundamental in Emma's understanding of the man sitting across from her. He wasn't just a gentle soul who'd been traumatized by war. He was someone who'd been forced to take lives, and who was capable of doing so again if necessary. Are you afraid of me now? Emma considered the question honestly. Was she afraid? Looking at Daniel, at his careful movements, his obvious remorse about his past, his 15 years of devotion to her grandmother, she realized that fear wasn't what she felt.
I'm not afraid of you, but I need to understand something. When you threatened that private investigator, were you protecting yourself or protecting Rose?
Both, but mostly Rose. Emma, your grandmother was the first person in years who saw me as something other than a weapon or a liability. I would have done anything to protect her.
Including kill?
Voice 3, Daniel. Including kill. The honesty was brutal, but Emma found herself respecting it more than if he'd tried to soften the truth. Daniel had been living with the weight of his capabilities for 15 years, using them only when absolutely necessary to protect the person who'd saved his life.
Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest.
He nodded.
Do you think the people you're hiding from are still looking for you?
Daniel considered the question carefully. I think they assume I'm dead. It's been 15 years without any sign of the photos surfacing. Most people would conclude that I either destroyed them or died with them.
But you're not sure.
I can never be sure. That's why I've stayed hidden all this time. Emma stood and walked to the small window that provided the chamber's natural light. Through it, she could see a slice of ocean and sky. Somewhere out there was the life she'd left behind. Her job, her apartment, her complicated relationship with her family. And somewhere out there were also people who might want to hurt Daniel if they knew he was alive. Emma, I understand if this is too much. I understand if you need to leave. She turned back to him.
What if I don't want to leave? What if I want to help you figure out how to move forward?
What do you mean?
I mean, maybe it's time to stop hiding. Maybe 15 years is long enough. What if we could find a way to expose those photos safely? What if we could get you your life back?
Daniel shook his head. Emma, you don't understand the kind of people we'd be dealing with. They've had 15 years to consolidate power, to cover their tracks. Coming forward now would be suicide.
Not if we do it right. Not if we're smart about it. Daniel, I worked in corporate communications for 8 years. I know how to manage information, how to control narratives, how to protect sources. This is what I'm good at.
For the first time since she'd met him, Daniel looked genuinely hopeful. You'd really help me?
I'd really help you, but I need you to promise me something.
Anything.
No more hiding. If we're going to do this, we do it together, honestly. No more secrets between us.
Daniel squeezed her hands. No more secrets. As they sealed the promise with a kiss, neither of them noticed the small red light blinking on Daniel's security monitor, the one that indicated motion at the lighthouse's main entrance. The same private investigator who'd found Daniel 3 years ago had returned, and this time he'd brought friends. The motion alarm's soft chime sent Daniel into immediate action mode. He moved to the security monitor with practiced efficiency. his earlier vulnerability replaced by the sharp focus of someone who'd survived 15 years in hiding. 3 vehicles, 6 men, maybe 7. They're not here for a casual visit. Emma joined him at the monitor, watching dark figures spread out around the lighthouse.
The private investigator?
Has to be, and he's brought backup this time. Daniel was already moving, pulling supplies from hidden compartments around the chamber. Emma, there's a tunnel that leads to the other side of the cliff. You can get out that way, be in your car, and gone before they know you were here.
I'm not leaving you.
This isn't a discussion. These people aren't here to negotiate. If they find me, they'll kill me. If they find you with me, they'll kill you too. Emma pushed the backpack away.
Then we both leave, through the tunnel.
I can't. Emma, there are things down here I can't abandon. The photos, yes, but also 15 years of documentation about our lighthouse operations. If they destroy this place, 17 ship saves will become meaningless. Hundreds of lives saved will be forgotten.
Those things aren't worth dying for.
They're worth living for, and sometimes living requires fighting. Through the monitor, they watched the intruders reach the lighthouse's main door. One of them produced what looked like lock-picking tools, while others positioned themselves around the building's perimeter. They know about the secret entrance. Look at how they're positioned. They're covering escape routes I didn't even know they knew about. Emma felt cold dread settling in her stomach.
How could they know so much about this place?
Someone talked. Someone who's been here before. The question is who? On the monitor, the lighthouse door swung open, and several figures disappeared inside. Emma could hear faint sounds from above as they began searching the building. Daniel, we have maybe 10 minutes before they find the hidden panel. I know. Daniel moved to his weapons cache and began methodically checking firearms Emma hadn't even known were there. Emma, please, use the tunnel. Get out of here. Instead of leaving, Emma moved to Daniel's radio equipment. Voice 2. Emma.
Who else knows about your work here? Other lighthouse operators? Coast Guard contacts? Anyone who might help us?
Emma, what are you doing?
Fighting back. You said you're part of a network of lighthouse operators. Can you contact them?
In theory, yes, but...
Then do it. Tell them what's happening. Create witnesses.
Daniel stared at her for a moment, then moved to join her at the radio. You're right. If I'm going down, I'm taking these bastards with me. He began transmitting on an emergency frequency, his voice calm and professional. This is Beacon Point Light to all stations. We have an emergency situation. Unknown armed individuals have invaded the lighthouse, requesting immediate assistance and asking all stations to monitor and record this transmission. Responses came back immediately from lighthouse operators up and down the coast. Daniel quickly explained the situation, not the full truth about his identity, but enough to ensure that whatever happened next would have witnesses.
Beacon Point. This is Portland Headlight. We're contacting Coast Guard and local authorities. Can you confirm number of intruders?
At least 6 individuals, possibly 7. They appear to be searching for specific materials or individuals. Be advised, this may be connected to federal-level criminal activity.
Emma felt a surge of pride at Daniel's quick thinking. By making the situation public across the Lighthouse network, he'd created a paper trail that would be impossible to cover up.
But their satisfaction was short-lived. The sounds from above were getting closer, and Emma could tell the searchers were being systematic about checking every inch of the lighthouse.
They'll find the panel soon.
Daniel nodded grimly. Emma, there's something else you should know. If they capture me alive, they'll torture me for information about the photos. I won't let that happen. The implication hit Emma like a physical blow.
Daniel, no.
I've lived 15 years longer than I thought I would, and I've gotten to meet you, which is more than I ever hoped for. But I won't give them what they want, and I won't let them hurt you to get to me. Emma grabbed his wrists.
There has to be another way.
There is, but it requires trusting me completely, and it might get us both killed.
Tell me.
The lighthouse beacon. If I can get up there and activate it during daylight, every ship in the area will see it. The Coast Guard will investigate, other lighthouse operators will know something's wrong, and these guys will have to deal with a lot more attention than they bargained for. Emma looked at the security monitor. The searchers were now on the second floor of the lighthouse, moving methodically through the storage areas.
How do we get past them?
We don't go past them, we go through them. Daniel moved to another equipment cache and pulled out what looked like smoke grenades. Military surplus. I've been saving them for 15 years, hoping I'd never need them.
Daniel, that's insane.
Insane is letting them find us down here like trapped rats. Emma, I need you to promise me something. If this goes wrong, if I don't make it, you take those photos and you run. Get them to someone who can use them.
I promise, but only if you promise me something too.
What?
Promise me you'll try to live through this. Promise me you won't sacrifice yourself unless there's absolutely no other choice.
Daniel looked into her eyes, and Emma saw him make a decision that went against every survival instinct he'd developed over 15 years in hiding. I promise. The sound of splintering wood echoed from above. They'd found the hidden panel. Now, what happened next moved with the fluid precision of a military operation. Daniel activated the smoke grenades and threw them up the stairway leading to the lighthouse proper, filling the space with thick, choking clouds. Then he and Emma charged up the stairs together, moving through the smoke toward the beacon room far above. Emma heard shouts of confusion from their pursuers, the sound of men coughing and stumbling in the smoke. Daniel moved through the chaos like he could see in the dark, guiding Emma with sure hands past obstacles and around corners. They reached the main lighthouse level as the smoke began to clear. 3 men were waiting for them, wearing gas masks and holding weapons. But Daniel had anticipated this, and his military training kicked in with lethal efficiency. Emma watched in amazement and terror as Daniel systematically neutralized the threats between them and the lighthouse stairs. He moved like a deadly ghost, using the lighthouse's layout and his intimate knowledge of every corner and hiding spot to turn the building into a weapon. Go! Get to the beacon room! Emma ran for the spiral staircase, climbing toward the lighthouse's lamp room as fast as her legs could carry her. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of Daniel's fight echoing through the building. She reached the beacon room, gasping, and immediately began working to activate the massive lens system. The lighthouse had been modernized over the years, but Emma remembered enough from her grandmother's stories to know the basics. As the powerful beam began to rotate, sending its signal far out to sea, she felt a moment of triumph. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs below. Emma, are you okay?
I'm here. The beacon's active.
But as Daniel appeared in the lamp room doorway, Emma saw that he was bleeding from several wounds and moving with obvious difficulty.
How many more?
All of them. For now. Daniel collapsed into a chair, breathing heavily. But Emma, we need to talk. I found something on one of them that changes everything. He pulled out a wallet and showed Emma an identification card that made her blood run cold. The private investigator wasn't working for criminals trying to cover up the photos Daniel had taken 15 years ago. He was working for the US government. Everything Emma and Daniel thought they knew was wrong. The government itself is hunting Daniel, which means exposing his photos could be even more dangerous than they imagined. Should they surrender and try to negotiate, keep fighting, or run and hope they can disappear forever? What would you choose when your own government wants you dead? Emma stared at the federal identification card, her mind struggling to process what it meant.
They're not just covering up old crimes, they're actively hunting you.
It's worse than that. Daniel pulled out additional items he'd taken from the intruders. Sophisticated communication equipment, surveillance gear, and most chilling of all, official-looking documents with both their names on them.
They know about me. How is that possible? I just got here yesterday.
Someone's been watching the lighthouse, probably for years. They knew you inherited it, knew you'd eventually come here. Emma, they didn't just find me. They used you to find me. The realization hit Emma like a physical blow. Her inheritance, her decision to come to the lighthouse, even her meeting with Daniel, it had all been orchestrated. She'd been unknowingly leading federal agents to the man she was falling in love with.
We have to run, right now before backup arrives.
Running won't work anymore. They have resources we can't match, and now they know we're together. But there might be another way.
What are you thinking?
Your grandmother was smarter than either of us gave her credit for. Daniel pulled up files on the lighthouse's computer system. Files Emma hadn't known existed. Voice 3. Daniel. She wasn't just documenting our ship rescues, she was documenting everything, including visits from federal agents over the years. Emma leaned over Daniel's shoulder as he scrolled through detailed logs. Her grandmother had been keeping records of every government vehicle that had passed the lighthouse, every official who had asked questions in town, every piece of surveillance equipment she'd spotted.
She knew they were looking for you.
She knew, and she prepared for it. Daniel opened another file, revealing a sophisticated network diagram. Rose didn't just maintain contact with other lighthouse operators. She created an entire underground network of people who could verify and distribute information if anything happened to us.
A dead man's switch?
Exactly. If I don't check in with specific contacts every 72 hours, a complete package of evidence gets sent to news organizations, foreign governments, and international watchdog groups simultaneously. Your grandmother turned this lighthouse into the world's most effective insurance policy. Emma felt a surge of pride for her grandmother's strategic brilliance, but also a new level of fear.
Daniel, if that's true, then killing us wouldn't solve their problem. It would make it worse.
Which means they're not here to kill us. They're here to capture us and force me to reveal the locations of all the evidence caches. Before Emma could respond, the lighthouse's communication system crackled to life. A voice she didn't recognize filled the lamp room.
Mr. Crown, this is Deputy Director Harrison with the Department of Homeland Security. We need to talk.
Daniel and Emma exchanged glances. Daniel reached for the communication controls. I'm listening, Director Harrison.
You've led us on quite a chase, Mr. Crown. 15 years is a long time to stay hidden. But it's also a long time for the situation to evolve. The people you're hiding from, the officials in your photographs, most of them are dead or retired. The threat you feared no longer exists.
Emma could see Daniel considering the words carefully. If that's true, why the armed raid? Why not just knock on the door?
Because we weren't sure if you'd become hostile after so many years in isolation. And frankly, because we didn't know if you were still the man who once served his country honorably, or if you'd become something else entirely.
What do you want from me? There was a pause before Harrison responded.
Your country wants to bring you home, Mr. Crown. Those photographs you took 15 years ago? They're needed now more than ever. We have new evidence of ongoing corruption, and your images could be the key to finally bringing justice to people who thought they were untouchable.
Emma grabbed Daniel's arm.
It could be a trap.
It could be. Director Harrison, I'm going to need more than your word that this is legitimate.
Understood. I'm transmitting authentication codes and case file numbers that you can verify through independent sources. I'm also sending you the current status of every official who appears in your photographs. You'll see that most are indeed dead or facing prosecution already.
Daniel's computer began receiving files, and Emma watched as he cross-referenced the information against his own records and external databases. Slowly, his expression began to change. Emma, look at this. He showed her a news article dated just 3 months ago. Senator Morrison, he was the main target of my photos, died in federal prison last year. He was convicted on corruption charges.
That doesn't mean the others aren't still dangerous.
No, but look at this list. Of the 12 officials in my photographs, 7 are dead, 3 are in prison, and 2 have been living in exile in countries without extradition treaties. Emma, the world moved on without me. Justice happened without my photos.
Then why do they want you now?
Daniel continued reading the transmitted files. Because there's a new network. Sons, protégés, business partners of the original conspirators. They've rebuilt the operation, and Director Harrison thinks my experience and evidence could help expose them. Emma felt torn between hope and suspicion.
Daniel, what does your gut tell you?
My gut tells me that 15 years of hiding might finally be enough. Emma, what if we could really end this? What if instead of running, we could finally fight back properly? The decision point had arrived. Emma realized that whatever they chose in the next few minutes would determine not just their survival, but the course of the rest of their lives. Director Harrison, if we agree to talk, what guarantees do we have for our safety?
Full federal protection, new identities if desired, and complete immunity for any actions taken in self-defense during your years in hiding. Miss Hartwell would also be offered protection and compensation for her involvement.
Emma felt a chill.
How do you know my name?
We've been monitoring the Lighthouse since your grandmother's death, Miss Hartwell. We know you're not involved in the original conspiracy, but we also know you're now essential to Mr. Crown's cooperation.
What do you mean, essential?
There was another pause.
Because, Miss Hartwell, our psychologists believe that after 15 years of isolation, Mr. Crown won't be willing to re-enter society without someone he trusts beside him. You've become his anchor to the world he left behind.
Emma looked at Daniel and saw the truth of the statement in his eyes. Somehow, in less than 48 hours, they'd become each other's lifelines. What happens if we say no?
Then you continue hiding, continue running, and the new corruption network continues operating. And eventually, they'll find you anyway, because they have resources we can't protect you from indefinitely.
And if we say yes?
Then we end this together. All of it. Finally.
Emma took Daniel's hand.
It's your choice. Whatever you decide, I'm with you.
Daniel squeezed her hand, then spoke into the communicator with a voice that carried 15 years of exhaustion and newfound determination. Director Harrison, we'll talk, but we do it on our terms, in a location of our choosing with independent witnesses present.
Agreed. Where would you like to meet?
Daniel smiled, and Emma saw a flash of the confident man he must have been before the war, before the hiding, before the fear. The Lighthouse Keeper's quarters, 1 hour. Come alone, and Director Harrison, bring everything you have on the new conspiracy. It's time to finish what I started 15 years ago. As they prepared for the meeting that would determine their future, Emma realized that her inheritance had given her far more than just property. It had given her purpose, love, and the chance to be part of something that really mattered. Outside, the lighthouse beacon continued to sweep across the ocean, guiding travelers safely home. Soon, if everything went right, it would guide Daniel home too, back to a world he'd thought he could never rejoin, but this time with someone who would make sure he never faced it alone. Emma and Daniel are about to take the biggest risk of their lives, trusting the government that's been hunting them for 15 years. Are they making the right choice or walking into a trap? What would you do? Take the chance for freedom and justice or disappear forever? Let me know in the comments, because their story proves that sometimes the greatest courage is choosing to trust again. 6 months later, Emma stood in the lighthouse's lamp room, watching the sun set over the Atlantic. The beacon was officially operational again, maintained by the Coast Guard with Daniel as its certified keeper. The hidden chamber below had been converted into a proper basement workshop, where Daniel pursued his photography, documenting the wildlife and maritime activity along the coast. The corruption network director Harrison had described was indeed real, and Daniel's photographs, combined with his expertise in identifying government cover-ups, had been instrumental in bringing down 12 high-ranking officials. His testimony before Congress had been classified, but the results were visible in the resignation letters and indictments that followed. Emma had started a consulting business, helping other whistleblowers navigate the complex process of coming forward safely. She split her time between Boston and the Lighthouse, but increasingly found herself drawn to the peace of the coastal life she'd discovered. "Any regrets?" Daniel asked, joining her at the lamp room window. Emma considered the question, as she had many times over the past months. Her old life in Boston seemed like something that had happened to someone else. The lighthouse, Daniel, the work they were doing together. This felt like the life she was meant to live.
Just one.
What's that?
I wish Grandmother Rose could have seen how this ended. I think she would have been proud.
Daniel tightened his arms around her. She did see it, Emma. She planned for it. Everything that happened, she made possible. As the lighthouse beam began its nightly rotation, sending its signal of safety and guidance across the dark ocean, Emma reflected on the truth of Daniel's words. Rose Hartwell had indeed planned for this ending, an ending where secrets were revealed, justice was served, and two damaged souls found healing in each other. The lighthouse keeper's secret had finally been told, and in the telling, both Emma and Daniel had found their way home.